Hey guys, in this language revision video I'm going to run through everything you need to know for the animal and human communication section of the language section for the psychology GCSE. We're going to know 4 functions of animal communication, so what 4 things can animals communicate for. We need to know a key study here, we've got the von Frisch bee study, and we need to know what can humans do with communication which makes our communication of a higher level than that of animals. So let's get stuck in. So as I just mentioned, firstly, a very important sentence when you're comparing animal and human communication is to know that animal communication has a limited number of functions while human communication has lots of functions. You can turn that sentence around if you want to, and you can say that human communication has lots of functions, a greater variety of functions, whilst animal communication has limited functions, but you need to use that sentence when making a comparison in the exam. Now, basically, animals, they do communicate, but they don't talk and use language like humans do. There's no evidence to point that out yet. So in terms of what we need to know for our GCSE exam is that animals do use vocalizations to convey messages, and they use these sort of vocalizations to communicate for 4 different reasons. So the 4 reasons that animals communicate for are, firstly, for survival purposes. So animals will make vocalizations to warn their pack if a threat or a predator is nearby. So really clever, making a noise if something dangerous turns up on the horizon and they need their pack to run away. The second reason animals use communication is for reproduction purposes. Animals will use sounds and displays to communicate and signal their intent to mate to a male or female member of their species. Thirdly, they will use communication for territory purposes. Animals will mark their territory and communicate to other animals of a similar animal that they are, this is their area, and they will do that by spreading their scent around certain areas. They could use that by using feces, urine, rubbing up against trees, for example, to mark their territory. And finally, animals will communicate about food. Animals will use signals, sounds, vocalizations to communicate to each other where they can find food. Ants are really good at this for using pheromones to tell other ants where the food is and communicate where the food is. In terms of a key study for this section, quite a popular study, and it comes up in the exam quite frequently, is the von Frisch bee study. And von Frisch wanted to investigate the idea of animals communicating for food, and he wanted to communicate whether or not bees communicate with each other about the location of food. So what von Frisch did, really clever setup. He sourced himself a glass beehive, which is quite good because it means that he can see what the bees are doing. He popped a little painted dot onto each bee so he knew that it was his bee, and then he placed 2 food sources of sugary water in range of this glass beehive, and then he simply observed the bees. Now what's important is to know that one of those sources of sugary water was about 10 meters away and the other one was about 300 meters away. So one was close and one was far away. He watched the bees fly off, and then he watched them come back, and he observed what they did. And basically what he noticed is that the bees were performing special dances to each other to signal how far away the food was that they found. So when they found the food that was close, 10 meters away, they performed a special little round dance to signal to the other bees that the food was close, and then the other bees would fly off and go and find the food and bring it back. Really clever. But when the food was really far away, they used a special waggle dance, which was kind of like going around in a bit of a figure of 8, waggling their sort of rear end quite a lot to point to the bees where the food was and how far away it was. It was a very, very clever, very, very intricate way of telling each other where food is. And so basically he was able to conclude that bees do use movements to communicate to each other how far away food is and where it is. So yes, animals do communicate about the location of food. Now, you're going to get questioned on this study. You'll probably get follow-up questions to evaluate it or evaluate the research method that they've used. So this is clearly a very highly controlled lab experiment. And we know that lab experiments have good and bad things. I mean, you should know. So basically, the good thing about lab studies is that they're highly controlled, they're highly standardized. It means that we can control for extraneous variables. There's good scientific value here because we're investigating bees. There's the idea that other people could repeat this study because it's so well controlled and standardized, so we can be confident that the bees were talking about or communicating about the location of food because of that control and because of the standardization. It's been repeated with reliable results. Now, obviously, using a lab experiment comes with a lot of negatives as well. So firstly, they used sugary water, which is not a typical food source for bees. So we'd say that's got low ecological validity. It's not normal for bees to be searching for sugary water. It's also not normal for bees to have paint on them. So it's possible to say that the bees were not displaying natural behaviour. We can also comment on the unnaturalness of the glass beehive. So the glass beehive comes with low ecological validity. It's not a normal hive for the bees to sort of set up a home in. So again, that they may not have been behaving completely naturally. And then also, if we're going to talk about how bees are actually communicating, I suppose this is a separate evaluation now. It's quite complicated, the way that the bees are communicating to each other, and to simplify it down just to this little dance is possibly a little bit too simple, a little bit reductionist. It does turn out, when you look at bees a little bit more, that they're doing a lot of other things as well. They're dancing in a certain direction. They're making different buzzing noises and vibrations, and it would assume that these are sort of indicating more information about the location of food. So maybe the communication about food is more complicated than just the dances. So maybe there's more to it that von Frisch didn't quite find out. But lots of evaluations there. Really easy to keep it focused on the fact that it was a lab study design. Really easy to evaluate. Now, what we finally need to cover is how human communication is different and what sets human communication at a higher level than animals. So as we've already said, humans have a greater variety of functions compared to animals when it comes to communication. We can do all the things that they do and more functions as well. Animals are obviously very limited to using their bodies and their voices to make vocalizations and dances, whereas we have literally special language that we can really communicate with. We have technology that we can communicate with as well, so we are much, much more advanced. But ultimately, we can cut it down to 3 things that would cover us for the exam. More than likely, you'd only need 2, but we'll play it safe and we'll cover 3 that are recommended for the GCSE exam. So what 3 things should we cover? Let's go through them. Firstly, the thing is that we are more creative. We have more creativity with our language than animals. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we are able to combine words in completely new ways to produce new and original ideas and expressions all the time. We are constantly making up new words, constantly coming up with new ways of talking to each other. So we are ever creative in our communication. Animals aren't. Animals only have a select number of signals that they have to choose from. We are literally forever making up new things. Second one, multiple channels. Humans can take the same message and share it in many different ways. I could talk to you in words about a message. I could write it down. I could give you a body language signal to let you know how I'm feeling. I could send it through sort of some technology, digital media. I've got lots of different ways that I could share the same message with you. So I can share the same message to you in multiple different channels. Animals obviously only have the vocalizations or the body movements. So our language is there's much more variety to our language and our communication than animals. And finally, I think this is the easiest one, displacement. So what we can do as humans is we can talk about things that haven't happened yet. We can make plans for things that haven't happened yet, and we can talk about things that are not present. So basically, I always summarize this as we can make plans for the future, we can make arrangements, Animals can't do this. Animals can't talk about things or communicate about things that haven't happened. They can't make plans. They are kind of just acting on instinct. We very much can. We can arrange to meet up at the weekend. We can arrange to talk about things that we might do next year and start to make plans. So our communications, there's three things that we can do with communication that animals can't do. That would more than cover you for the exam this summer. So that's everything you need to know for animal and human communication. Make sure you know 4 functions of animal communication. Make sure you know the bee study really well and you can evaluate it based on being a lab experiment. And make sure you know what humans can do with communication that animals cannot.